When is someone going to give us a song that we can play at the beginning of our show? Welcome, everyone. This is Shannon O'Loughlin, citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and your host for tonight here at Red Hoop Talk, a Native news and talk show where we bring you wonderful people from all over Indian country doing amazing things. Not famous Indians, not movie star Indians, but people who are really on a day-to-day basis working to strengthen our rights and strengthen and preserve our cultures and share with you how to stay close to culture and what they do to stay close to culture. So let's see. It's been an eventful week this week. On the I'll give you bad news first and then good news. So on the bad news, I think it came out today from the U.S. Supreme Court that, well, some think it's bad, some think it's good. So I'm not going to put that judgment on it. But way back, many shows ago, we were sharing with you how in the Trump administration, they were going to give CARES Act funding to Alaska Native corporations. And if you know anything about the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, Alaska Native corporations are state for-profit corporations, but they hold title to lands in Alaska. Yet there's still more than 200 and something federally recognized tribes that are mostly Alaska Native villages throughout Alaska that are federally recognized. And of course, the Alaska Native Corp is something different than a tribe with sovereign and self-government or self-governance. So we talked to you about how Tara Sweeney, who was a shareholder in Alaska Native Corporation in the Trump administration, how there seemed to be a little bit of weirdness going on, the fact that Alaska Native corporations were included in the funding for federally recognized tribes. Well, okay, now that all that's said, the Supreme Court decided that Alaska Native Corps are, in fact, Indian tribes. So I'm not sure what that's going to mean beyond the CARES Act funding, if it will mean anything beyond the CARES Act funding. But I guess we'll see. So check that out. It's out in papers and in any kind of law periodicals that you look at, you'll find reference to that case. Let me stop there and because I went right past welcoming everybody and saying, please join us on our chat. Let us know who you are, where you're coming from, what nation that you are affiliated with. And did I even say, usually every freaking week you all see this, I do my intros different every time. And sometimes I forget things. I'm a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. And I'm coming to you from the lands of the Piscataway people. Where am I? I'm north of what is known as Washington, D.C. here in Maryland. Behind me are lands from Sugar Island and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And tonight our guest is an indigenous relative from Michigan, from Grand Traverse. Her name is ROSE Petoskeey. We'll be bringing on in a minute. Yes, Lance, that was what I was going to declare as making this a wonderful day today. It is the 145th anniversary of the battle at Greasy Grass, where the Lakota and the Cheyenne kicked somebody's butt. Whose butt was that? That was Custer. Some know it as Custer's Last Stand at the Battle of Little Bighorn. The Cheyenne and Dakota refer to it as the Battle at Greasy Grass. And we also refer to it as Victory Day. So everyone celebrate Victory Day today. We're also celebrating that Deb Haaland announced a new initiative regarding federal boarding schools in the United States. You all have heard about the children's grave sites that have been found at a couple now different boarding schools in Canada. And there have been movements through friends of ours at the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition regarding boarding school reparations and truth and healing, and to develop a commission to look into this. Well, our friend at the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, announced that they were starting an initiative to investigate federal boarding schools and also investigate the locations of where those mostly unmarked graves are of our children. And we're hoping that we'll be involved with that to support repatriation issues and to support this movement for healing and for healing from our boarding school. There's not a single one of us, I think, that has not been touched by the boarding school era. My great-grandmother went to boarding school, Wheelock Seminary in Choctaw Land in Oklahoma. And my grandmother told me stories about her coming into a room full of adults who would just stop speaking Choctaw. And my grandmother was so wanting to know what they were saying, and would often ask them questions about it. And when they wouldn't answer, she would go sneak away to neighbors and talk to them about the language and stomp dances and other things. So the boarding schools had a long-lasting effect even until today. That's enough out of me, I think. Hey, Jamie, nice to see you on. Everyone, please let us know who you are, where you're coming from, and why don't we get into our guest tonight. I am so happy to have with us an amazing legal warrior, Rose Petoskeey. Let me bring her up here. Pop, there she is. Hey, Rose.
Hi.
So happy to have you. Rose has been, when did you graduate law school? 2013?
2015.
2015. And you have been with the same law firm for that entire time out of law school, and even before?
For almost 6 years, yeah. And then I was a summer associate there in law school too. So I've been there for a while now. Yeah.
Right. So she's with a law firm here in DC, and she is involved in mentoring young people who want to come to DC. She's a managing associate, which is a big deal at a law firm for a young attorney. That's a lot of responsibility that she has. And she's working to fight for Native rights and the work she does. From Traverse.
Grand Traverse. Yeah. Little Traverse.
Yeah, I was missing a word in there somewhere. So Rose, would you like to? I know I can get into your bio. You went to Michigan State University. You went to Cornell for law school. You've had this great 6 years practicing law here in Washington D.C. But tell us really about who you are and where you come from.
Yeah. So hello, Ani, everyone. Kaneda Webenesikwe, Indigenous Costs. Mishike and Dodem, Peshabitown, Michigan, and Dojaba. My name is Rose Petoskeey. I'm a member of the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. I grew up on our reservation in Peshabitown, Michigan, which, if you've never been to Michigan, we do this. This is the band, and our reservation is right up here. And there's a bay right here with Lake Michigan on the other side. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. So it was wonderful to grow up there. But as Shannon said, I've been in DC for about almost 6 years now, practicing Indian law. I've been at the same firm the whole time. It's a big law firm with a smaller Native American law and policy practice group. And we do all sorts of things for tribes. And I mostly focus on Indian lands and fee to trust work, rural economic development, Indian gaming, and really creating land bases for tribes, because that's the basis of sovereignty. You have land and you build everything around that. So that's what I've been doing here in DC for the past 6 years. So it's lovely to be here with you all today.
Thank you so much, Rose. So how the heck did you get from up there
Yes.
to here in DC? And you've told me a little bit about your background, and you seem to have grown up with advocacy as part of your life since you were teeny tiny.
Yeah.
So tell us about how you grew up and how these values to be an advocate and a legal advocate came about.
Yeah, so my parents are both from the same tribe, and they're both from very big families in the same tribe. So I grew up very grounded at home on the reservation. And my dad, since I was born, has been working as the general counsel for our tribe. So for over 20 years now, he's been serving as the general counsel for Grand Traverse Band. Did some other things in different periods, but that's been his most of his career. And then my mom was the vice chairwoman when I was very young. And I really, saw through their leadership and advocacy, and they were sort of exceptional for their generation. I mean, my parents are almost 70 years old, and my dad has a JD and my mom has a master's degree. So growing up, and my dad went to a boarding school too. My dad went to an Indian boarding school. So and then he went on from that to get a law degree. So I'm really grateful for them, and they've really made me into the person that I am today, and wanting to advocate for tribal nations, including my own. And I think in terms of wanting to be a lawyer, and wanting to come to DC, sort of how I got here was, just seeing my dad and all the things that, he helped make possible for our tribe, through primarily, through economic development and fee to trust and Indian gaming, and developing, casinos and making sure that we had that, resource to develop our tribe. We were terminated. So Grand Traverse is the first tribe to go through what's called the Part 83 federal recognition process at Interior. So we went through that process in 1980 and were restored to federal recognition. So, I've been blessed in my lifetime to come from a federally recognized tribe because of the people who worked so hard for restoration in 1980. So, let's see how I got to DC.
Yeah, well, I remember when Frank Edwagishik was on the show, he talked about that fight for federal recognition. Yes. So if you need more context there, go back to Frank's show. So
Frank was there. I wasn't there.
He was a tribal counselor, tribal chair, I think, at that time. So what is your tribe like? How big? You talked about gaming. What's that like now there? Can you tell a little bit about your tribe?
Yeah, so we have a little over 4,000 members. Like I said, our main reservation is located right along the bay there in the Pinky. And yeah, we have a smaller casino on what's our initial reservation. And then we have a larger Turtle Creek casino just outside of Traverse City, which is sort of a larger, I wouldn't say it's necessarily metropolitan, but the reservation is very rural. There's a larger city where we have a gaming facility there. And then we also operate Grand Traverse Resort, which is a big resort facility in Traverse City. The area is really a sort of summer home area. So the summertime is really the time that the most economic development and things actually happen. In the winter, it's very very quiet and cold.
Well, and so do you miss not being there? Do you get to go back often?
I miss it a lot. I mean, I grew up there until I was 18, and then I went to Michigan State, which was not very far away. But I remember when I first went to Michigan State, I was so used to living somewhere that was so close to Lake Michigan. And I talked to other Native folks who have experienced this too. And I moved to Michigan State, which really isn't, it's still in Michigan, but it wasn't by the water. And it was like a totally new, there's a lot of other cultural shock things too, but that was one thing that was really different for me. And because of where I grew up and because our culture is so entwined with, Lake Michigan and the water there, that was, and it's still hard for me to be away from home and be away just from the place, the water, the trees, the plants, things that are there. And I don't go back as much as I should, although my parents were just here actually this past week for the first time in a long time because of, COVID and everything. So.
Yeah, that must have been hard, not being able to see folks back home because of the pandemic. Have you been back there at any time during the pandemic?
Yes, so I actually went back in March for a month and stayed at home and got vaccinated at home. So yeah, it was nice to be back during that time. But I'm sure like everyone can relate on here. The pandemic was very difficult for Indian country. My tribe and myself, I've lost close family members to COVID, and not being able to go to their funeral. I attended funerals from Zoom from my home in DC, back at the reservation. So yeah, it's been a very difficult year, but we're definitely seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So it was nice to have my parents here for a little bit.
Oh yeah, I bet. And I hope they enjoyed DC.
Yeah, very different than where we're from, but yes, they like it here too.
Yeah, for sure. So from there to Michigan State, and was it really your dad and his experience with the law that you got to kind of partake in as a child? Was that what drove you to law school and want to go to law school, or was there anything else that happened?
I think it was really both of my parents and their advocacy and seeing how a legal education can help you to protect your people, your culture, the next generation. You can, by having that education and having legal skills, you have the ability to protect your community. And I saw that when I was young. And I was fortunate to have someone, like my dad and also my mom with her work as the vice chair, showing, I had role models who told me I could do that, that I could be a lawyer. And so something that, is really important to me now is to be someone who tells younger Native people, that you can be a lawyer, you can go to law school. And, it's something that will help you protect your people if you do. But I think it's so important. You have to have that person that tells you can, because, a lot of Native kids grow up thinking, they don't think about being a lawyer because they don't see anybody who is in a lot of instances. So
yeah, that's what I never considered going to law school. I thought I would probably get my doctorate or something like that in Native American history and teach. And my friend, I call him Lumbee Larry. Lumbee Larry was in the quad at Long Beach State, Cal State Long Beach, and was looking through this blue paperback book thing. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm studying for the LSAT. And I'm like, well, what the hell is that? And he said, well, I want to go to law school. And I'm like, well, if a lumbie can do it, I can go to law school. And really, it was that kind of kidding around. I'd never known a lawyer or had that experience. And people that grew up with me kind of thought it was funny that I would choose that profession, but it does provide you a way of thinking and looking at the world that can be extremely helpful in working through the complicated issues that we face in Indian country. What can you talk a little bit about what is day-to-day life like for Rose as an attorney? What kind of things do you work on? Are you working on litigation? Are you doing a lot of research and writing? What's like, what was that like your first few years at law school, and what's it like today?
Well, in terms of day-to-day experience, I mean, we work for tribes across the country, and like I said, I do a lot of fee to trust work for folks who don't know exactly what that is it's getting land into trust for tribes. So you have a reservation, and there's specific uses you can get land into trust for, and one of them is land in a trust for gaming, and so I do a lot of that work, trying to expand reservation land bases for tribes, like I said, as the foundation of sovereignty. So you can have a tribal government center, so you can have healthcare, so you can have a police force, so you can have your economic development initiatives. And I work on that in a variety of contexts, in litigation, also in Congress, and a variety of other things too. But it's great being here in DC. Like if you're a person who's thinking about going to law school or wanting to practice federal Indian law, DC is a great place to do it, because Indian law intersects so much with federal agencies here. You have the Indian Health Service, you have the Department of the Interior with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Bureau of Indian Education. So practicing Indian law and being here in DC, you sort of get to see how it's all made and what's going on. So that's not to say that I've always wanted to move home too, and working for a tribal government is awesome as well. But the experience you get here is great too.
Yeah, you get to see how the fry bread is made.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't look like fry bread at all.
No.
So talk a little bit more about fee into trust, meaning land, just regular land held by the tribe. It's placed into trust so that there's protection from the federal government, and then the federal government holds the title, and then there's certain rights that you have as an Indian tribe when your land is taken into trust by the federal government versus just private land that's subject to state laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's some things that are at issue with that right now, and I think back in 2009 there was a Supreme Court case called Carcieri. Can you talk a little bit about what that did?
Yeah.
And how you might be involved with that?
Yeah, so one of the main issues that I work on in Land in a Trust, and one of the things that's happened in the last 10 years that's made it harder, particularly for newly recognized tribes and tribes that have gone through what's called the Part 83 process through Interior, tribes who were restored, is this decision that Shannon is talking about, Carcieri v. Salazar, where the Supreme Court held that in order to get land into trust under the Indian Reorganization Act, which is a statute that is, how a lot of tribes get, tribes can get reservation status through a variety of means, through a land claim settlement and all these other different things. But one of the primary avenues is the Indian Reorganization Act, which is the Secretary of Interior's authority to take land into trust for tribes. So what Carcieri did in 2009 is interpret a specific definition of what it means to be Indian for purposes of taking land into trust. And it required a tribe to prove that they were under federal jurisdiction in 1934 in order to have land brought into trust by the Secretary of the Interior. Now, and then the big question in 2009 after this happened was, what does under federal jurisdiction in 1934 mean? How does the tribe prove that they were under federal jurisdiction in 1934? So what happened in 2014, the then Solicitor of the Interior, Hillary Tompkins, authored an opinion, an M opinion, which is an opinion of the top attorney at the solicitor, the top attorney at Interior, interpreting what it means to be under federal jurisdiction in 1934. And that opinion sort of describes how a tribe can meet the under federal jurisdiction requirement through saying they have a treaty. If you had a treaty in place in 1934, that's a great evidence of under federal jurisdiction. If you had tribal members who were at federally operated Indian boarding schools, if you had you were under the superintendency of a BIA region at the time, that is proof of under federal jurisdiction. But the problem is this has created a lot of issues for tribes who have a hard time finding this type of evidence to prove that they're under federal jurisdiction. It's also, very costly for tribes too to have to prove that they're under federal jurisdiction to have land put into trust under the Indian Reorganization Act. And there's been a lot of efforts, and there's still efforts from the current administration to fix this problem. To say that, because prior to 2009, like Shannon was talking about, there was no under federal jurisdiction requirement. Mm-hmm. If you were a federally recognized tribe and you wanted to have your land put into trust, you could apply under Section 5 of the Indian Reorganization Act, and there you go. You do the process, and you don't even have to worry about this under federal jurisdiction stuff. But now you do, and there's been some efforts in Congress to take away the under federal jurisdiction requirement, but those have so far not been successful. But the Biden administration, actually, I think in the Interior budget request, there is language to fix the Carcieri problem. And I think Secretary Haaland actually spoke about that in her remarks at NCAI earlier this week. So a Carcieri fix would be great for tribes, and it would make the process much easier.
Right, and it's interesting, the Indian Reorganization Act. So the association was actually involved in the development of the IRA, and John Collier was, one of our founding people who drafted that act. And at the time, it was a freaking progressive.
Yes, the Indian New Deal.
Yeah, exactly. It ended allotment. It ended that kind of assimilationist type policies. Not that they didn't continue in later decades, like through the termination era and the relocation era, but it was really a progressive thing. It set up this way that tribes could create a kind of recognized form of government. Unfortunately, it was a very Western type form of government and hasn't been successful for some tribes. It also created this thing called a Section 17 corporation, right? Which allows a tribe to have this federal corporation that has all the kind of vestiges of the tribe. So it has, its own sovereign immunity, and its efforts are for, raising money for the tribe or doing economic development for, tribal governance. So there's great things in IRA, and then there's this, weird language under federal jurisdiction that they never would have contemplated then what's happening
now.
Today.
Yeah.
Right. Because back then, I forget how many, but there were likely half as many federally recognized tribes, or at least about 2/3. I can't remember what the numbers were. but even the federally recognized tribes number was different then. So I saw something about what was it? Representative from Hawaii, Schatz? Was it Schatz who introduced some bipartisan legislation and that?
Yes, so just recently in the Senate, there's been a Carcieri fix bill introduced, I think by Schatz, and also the other lead co-sponsor, I think, is Senator Tester from Montana.
Tester, really? Wow.
And it's a bipartisan bill, which is great, and it would, if passed, would fix this problem. Would no longer require tribes to prove that they were under federal jurisdiction to have land taken into the trust under the Indian Organization Act, and it would be great, to have a country fix. So
I'm seeing a question from Lance. Let's see if I can pull it up. It's kind of in two parts, but how can individual Indian landowners protect their land from probate reverse court rulings? I think is the second one. Probate reverse court rulings.
I'm not very familiar with individual Indian issues, and particularly probate. So I don't know if I can adequately answer that question.
Yeah, it is a different animal than tribally held lands. And I think a lot of it may even be dependent on particular acts of Congress that have happened throughout time. But yeah, good question, Lance. Sorry we can't help you. If Lance, if you have that issue, I'm sure one of us can get one of our attorney friends on the line, but you're going to have to pay them an hourly rate. Sorry.
Probate is a whole nother animal too. It's very complicated.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where the status of the laws that were working to consolidate individually held Indian parcels and transfer those as part of the tribally held lands. But land is a really complicated issue in Indian country. And so when you went to law school at Michigan and had property law class, did they bring up any of the Indian land issues there?
So I went to Michigan State for undergrad, and then I went to Cornell for law school.
Cornell, that's right.
In upstate New York, which was totally different experience for me than going to Michigan State. I went to Cornell because I was in the Pre-Law Summer Institute program, which if you're thinking about going to law school and you're a Native student, check out PLSI. It is the best way to get prepared for law school, and you'll meet some other amazing Native folks going to law school. So plug for PLSI. But I got recruited from PLSI to go to Cornell. And I had a good experience there, but there's a lot of great people at Cornell, but I was one of only a couple Native students in my class. There was one other person that was recruited from PLSI with me. And law school can be difficult as a Native person going in to classes like property law and constitutional law, where there's these foundational cases, that actually deal with Indian lands, particularly in property law, but they don't talk about them that way. They talk about it, as sort of Western property law, and it's Indian lands is not something that is taught unless you're taking a federal Indian law course. Right. Which a lot of schools still don't have.
Right. You're right. So I'm seeing additional legal questions in the chat, but before we go there, I'd really like to get in more about your experience of being growing as an attorney in your career, what that's been like for you. What challenges you've had, and then how you've been able to connect as a mentor maybe through the Native Bar Association and other places to kind of help others along the way.
Yeah, and I think, I coming to DC was something that sort of stuck with me when I was in undergrad, because I was in what's called the Udall Foundation Native American Congressional Internship Program, which Shannon is also an alum of, another great program that brings students here to DC, usually 12 or so students per summer, and places them in federal agencies or on the Hill in Congress. And when I did that, I worked for the Department of the Interior in the Assistant Secretary Indian Affairs Office, and I really, got to see how things were done. And I had great mentors who were there at the time too. Brian Newland, the current Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs nominee, was a counselor at the time, and he was a great mentor to me and friend. So I got to learn a lot from him and folks here in DC, and also from folks who were in my class with me in my Udall class, who are now, have gone on to do great things and working for Indian country as well. So I think, it's important you have mentors who are also your peers, who are people who you're working with, and I think that's, really important to learn from those people as well. But in terms of how I've grown, come here and then, at the firm, being another thing that's hard if you're thinking about going to law school is figuring out, what you want to do. Do you want to practice Indian law? Do you want to work for a tribal government? Do you want to maybe go into the federal government and do something, from the federal side in Indian law, or do you want to go into private practice? And I remember when I was at Cornell and interviewing for, they call it on-campus interviews, and I wanted to do Indian law. And they're just, I would say that to people in interviews, and people would look at me like, what is that? And these are people who are, accomplished attorneys. And it's just, unless you're really, engaged in the community, a lot of people don't know, and we know that too. I mean, that's rampant in other, areas of our lives too. But it's a challenge, even trying to go to a law firm, and especially if you don't want, you don't have to do Indian law if you want to do something else, and then you might still probably be one of the only Native people in that firm, which can be it's hard, but that's why it's so important to support each other.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why there are these wonderful support systems like PLSI. And I think in law school, were you involved with NALSA, the Native American Law Students Association?
Yeah, so
somehow, even though, Cornell is.
Yeah, so we had a small Native group of folks at Cornell, and we were involved in National NALSA. So I was on the National NALSA board when I was in law school. And National NALSA is also another great resource and it has really, since I was in National NALSA, has really grown a lot too, in terms of capacity of holding career fairs and that type of thing. So one of the things we do here in DC through the Native American Bar Association of DC is try to work with folks like National NALSA, with the Udall internship program, with other Native, internship programs, to try to bring folks here to DC, make young Native people feel comfortable being in DC. So I was the past president of the Native American Bar Association in 2020, which was an interesting year to be the president of the Bar Association, since we took all of our events virtual. But some of the things that we do to try to support young Native folks coming to DC is we call it a brown bag lunch program. And so we have a program where we work with federal agencies, law firms, and anybody doing Indian law and policy in DC. And we ask them to host Oh, there's our website. Yeah. We asked them to host lunches for interns who are working in Indian law and policy in DC. And it's a great way for Native students who come here to meet people who are working in Indian law and policy and to stay connected with folks. The other thing we do is have a mentorship program. And we assign, folks who are practicing Indian law here in DC or who are working on the Hill, doing Indian affairs or working at Interior in Indian affairs to be a mentor for students that come here. And it's something that, I benefited from when I was an intern, and it's something, that's been going on for a long time, and it's really sort of a pay it forward, thing. I think everybody on the board right now of NABA DC has benefited from NABA DC's programs in the past, and is working to make it stronger. So in 2020, we went all virtual, which in some ways was good because we had Native students who were not necessarily working in DC, but interested in coming to DC. They could be working for a tribe in California or something, but they attended all of our, virtual lunch events. So it was a good, program in that way this year. So.
Oh yeah, and I think this year too is all virtual. I think the Association on American Indian Affairs, we're having a brown bag lunch, so it's always good. I've been involved with, like when I was at NIGC and other places with the brown bags, and it's always been great to kind of see these young, eager students learning. And I remember myself when I was in the UDAL program and coming to DC and going to those brown bags. And I remember like the National Indian Gaming Commission and the association, National Indian Gaming Association, and then some of these law firms. I remember meeting Keith Harper when he had long hair, and he was all svelte like that, like some kind of like big bodybuilder. Now he's an old man with short hair. He won't hear that. Don't anyone tell him. No, but it's really amazing the people that you meet who are working in federal agencies and Native organizations here in the DC area, and the work that they're committed to doing. There are so many people who are career government people who have been in the DC area working in Indian affairs kind of behind the scenes that we may not even know about, who have been able to be there and kind of watch how things are shaped and even, participate in shaping them. So what was your experience like with the Udall Foundation? Where did you work for your internship?
So I was at Interior in the Assistant Secretary Indian Affairs office when Larry Echohawk was the Assistant Secretary under the Obama administration, and I had a great experience doing that. And like you were saying, I think one of the things that I took away from first coming to DC, because it was different for me. I had always, prior to that, I had kind of envisioned, maybe I would come back and work for my tribe, and I still think about doing that because I want to be at home. But prior to that, I didn't really know what DC was about and what like being an Indian working in DC might be like. And I think, when I got here, you sort of realize that there are all these people, it's a small Native community, but there are a lot of Native folks here, like working in Congress, who've worked at the agencies for a really long time, who have been there, sort of quietly advocating for Indian country within the federal government, and quietly making these changes with little to no recognition in a lot of cases. So I think for me that was really inspiring, to see people work so hard, from within the system to try to make a difference for all of Indian country. And so coming back here, I really, wanted to be a part of that, trying to make more of a difference on a national level. So I think, when I was only 20 years old when I came here as a UDOL intern. So it was intimidating at the time, but I really sort of, wanted to be in DC after that, because I saw, all these great, Native people working here and really making a difference, and I wanted to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of, there's different kinds of attorneys, and what kind of attorney would you describe yourself as, besides a federal Indian law attorney? Are you doing more transactional work? Are you doing litigation work? Are you getting to do everything? And where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years?
So I do a lot of different type of work. We do a lot of policy work too. So sort of like, national advocacy for like a Carcieri fix or something like that. And I do litigation, mostly on Indian lands and Indian gaming related work, but I wouldn't describe myself as a litigator. I don't go argue in court, but I do a lot of brief writing and things like that. So I would say I'm a mix between litigation and sort of transactional work. When I was at Cornell has sort of a larger corporate focus, and I thought I wanted to be a corporate attorney and do that for tribes, which is a really important aspect of tribal economic development as well. So we need those transactional people. But I've sort of gotten particularly over the last 4 years into this sort of niche Indian lands type of practice, and so that's mostly what I do now. And in terms of what I would want to do in the future, I'm happy here in DC. It's like I said, it's inspiring to be here sometimes. It's also difficult to be here sometimes, particularly this past year with everything that happened or transpired after the election. But it's also an exciting place to be. And there's a lot of really great, like I said, Indian country advocates here. So we'll see. I mean, I've been here for 6 years, and I feel sort of at home here. It's never going to be, Peshabi town and my home. But, we'll see what comes.
Well, share with us, if you wouldn't mind, some other work that you do outside of the law, which helps others kind of lift up. Maybe some of your campaign work that you've been a part of.
Yeah. So my significant other, Rudy Soto.
That's right. She has a boyfriend, everybody.
I do.
A boyfriend. Okay. So I don't want to get any emails from any of you saying, hey, she's already taken. Okay, go ahead, Rose. I'm sorry.
So Rudy ran for Congress in Idaho.
Rudy Soto, yes.
Ran for Congress in Idaho this past election cycle. And he was the Democratic nominee for Idaho's 1st congressional district. He is a member of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes in Idaho, and he's also the son of a Mexican immigrant. His dad immigrated from Mexico. So yeah, it was a really exciting time, and it was something that I hadn't. Being in DC, you are exposed to some of the campaign cycles and things, how elections impact work here. But actually working on a campaign and developing a campaign from the decision to run, and trying to figure out how to run a campaign. And I think one of the things going into this that I always think about when you think about being a Native person running for Congress, or anybody running for an elected position, is it's hard. You have to dedicate a lot of time. And if you're not independently wealthy, it's particularly difficult, because you are doing, and when you're running, you're doing an unpaid job, trying to get elected to Congress. So for Rudy had been here in DC who's working for the National Indian Gaming Association as their legislative director, had always wanted to move home and run. And with this election cycle coming up, where there could potentially have been a larger blue wave, we didn't exactly see that, and we lost seats in the House on the Democratic side, but we sort of just went for it. And I say we because he was the candidate, but I was there every step of the way. And it's we really need more Native people running for office. It's so important to be in those, to have Native folks in the room and be represented there. And we've seen that through Congresswoman Sharice Davids, now through Secretary Holland, and it's it's something that's so important, but it's something that's also so difficult. To be a Native person, one, to think you can run, and then figure out how to do it. And that's something, we sort of learned on our feet. And I ended up at the end of the, closer to election day in the last couple months, taking months off of work and just going out there and working with the campaign. And Rudy ultimately didn't win. He was the Democratic nominee, and Idaho's a very red state. But we're still very involved there with trying to get primarily, minority folks registered to vote, because being engaged in voting is also really important, because particularly being a Native person, there are a lot of federal actions that impact us almost every day, and so voting is so important. And if we vote, we can get more folks elected, like Sharice, and like Deb Holland. So,
and we're already seeing so many changes and radical shifts that we've been waiting so long for now. So grateful. And I think there'd probably be more people, more Native people who are running for office, but our reputations and all of those 49s back in the day, I think just a lot of people from Indian country, what do y'all think? We're just worried that, maybe some bad pictures will come out or something. So most of us just, don't want all that attention on us. But well, I'm waiting for you to run for office one day, Rose. Maybe you and Rudy could do like a president, vice president couple thing. I think people would totally be into that.
Well, it would be great to have a Native president, and that's what's also so great about about having Deb Holland. I the other day I was watching just a couple of days ago Brian Newland, the Assistant Secretary nominee, talk about Secretary Holland, and particularly with the Federal Indian School boarding school initiative. How, and he was saying this was it was something put on by Harvard. He was doing a talk with a few other people, and he just said, she gets it. She gets it. Like, there was no trying to convince her to do that. With someone, who was a non-Native person, you might have had to explain, what the impact of boarding schools were and why this is so important. But, with Secretary Holland, she's a Native person. She's had, her family has been impacted. Herself, she's been impacted by the terrible legacy of boarding schools. So, like Brian was saying, she just gets it, and so that's why this happened so fast. And I think Secretary Holland's appointment is really a testament to how important representation in these places is. So
yeah, for sure. Lance is asking about that there's the states now, Arizona and others, that are putting out these voter suppression bills, and what's up with your thing, Lance? It's all broken in half. So it says, what can Natives do to battle the voter suppression bills? These laws directly stop the Native vote, which helps shape the political environment. Sorry, chubby Indian fingers. That's what he says.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely, the native vote, particularly as we saw in Arizona, is one that comes to my mind. That was a big, the native vote there was a big reason that state went Democrat. So I think in terms of how to battle voter suppression, a lot of it is in sort of the grassroots efforts in the state. So one of the things that Rudy and I have been working on, was trying to work with the Idaho Democratic Party to reach out and register more voters. And I think and this applies to politics in general. One of the things I think at a party level that is so important, and the administration has been focused on this too, is hiring diverse people, hiring people for your political operation that can reach out to these communities and connect with people and tell them why it's so important to vote, and really connect with them on their level. So I know there's a lot of sort of more national initiatives for Native Vote. I know NCI has a big a Native Vote operation. There's one person who's really great to talk about Native Vote is Teresa Sheldon from the DNC there. She's the Native American political director there, and she does a ton of Native Vote advocacy and work. But I think when we talk about what can we do to battle suppression, it's really, other than, advocating against these laws, the other way to do it is to try to, make voting less intimidating for folks. Say, I'll go with you to the voting booth. Because I think, voting, even for me as, as an attorney, as an educator, because sometimes I go into a voting place where I might feel uncomfortable, where I'm the only minority person there, or where sometimes I don't know where to go, or whatever, and I think part of battling suppression is just making our communities feel comfortable going to the voting booth, and just reaching out to those folks who might not feel comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we've had, and I've spoken with folks in Indian country. There definitely are people who feel that once you're in politics or in DC even, or even a practicing lawyer, that you've kind of given over to the other side, that you are somehow a traitor and don't have credibility even with your own nation anymore because you've chose to work in that system, which is taken from us. And so I've had my own internal dialogue about that. But have you, had that conflict in yourself about, what am I doing? I'm swearing to uphold the Constitution of the United States and all of its laws that have been on the backs of Native and enslaved peoples. How do you kind of come to terms with that?
It's hard. I mean, I think, even going to law school, like you say, and working within, the federal court system, sometimes can, even, federal Indian law, calling it that can sometimes feel, demeaning to tribal governments, or because the system has been so oppressive. But I think what's helped me sort of work within the system is to recognize that you can make change that way, and it's not the only way. It's not the only way to make positive change for Indian country and for tribes, but it is a way. And there are a lot of people here in DC sort of working within the system to try to make that positive change for future generations. And so I think I've had those feelings, especially when I first moved here, and I think over the years I've realized that there's good people everywhere, and you can make the change that you want, within the system that sort of, has been oppressing tribes. But, working in DC, you can still make that change.
Absolutely. And be the voice and the face of that change, because just being here, I think, helps to remind folks of those obligations that are still owed in Indian country. And I also think it's really important, even if we don't agree with someone else's path that they've chose, that we are still able to support and encourage, because it takes each and every one of us in Indian country to help change and make things better for the next generation. So everything that all of us are doing together and collectively is extremely important. And I also wanted to talk, before I forget, about twins, because that's
Yes,
another
twins.
recent thing that you're involved with that is really helping to raise up Indigenous women. So
Yeah. So Twin is a group now of about almost over 200 Native women. It's called Tribal Women for Indigenous Nations, TWIN for short. And it was started by, we call them the aunties of Indian country, back on election night this past November. And it was really just a informal gathering of Native women on election night to talk about the election, to see how things went, what was going to happen, for tribes and for Indian country, in this next election. And then it sort of evolved into, what can we do as Native women to have stronger representation within the administration, and really at all levels of the government, state and local, federal, of Native women working in these positions, inspired by, Native women like Secretary Holland or Congresswoman Davids, who have really, broke the glass ceiling on a lot of these areas. So we started meeting sort of informally every Tuesday. Now we meet every other Tuesday. And in the beginning, we were really focused on, like I said, trying to push Native folks, or Native women in particular, to have political appointments in the administration. So we were working as sort of a quiet advocacy, a group of Native women, to push names into the administration, to try to get more Native women represented, not only within Indian affairs, but across the federal government, because it's so important to have Native folks at all of these different agencies, because every agency, whether it's USDA, Department of Homeland Security, Interior is an obvious one, but all these other agencies impact Indian country in some way. So having a Native person in those agencies is really, really important to bring that perspective to the agencies. So we were focused on that a lot in the beginning, and now we're just meeting to have support each other and be a group of Native women that supports each other in what we do. So our last meeting was the Tuesday before last, and we had the Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition come and do a presentation, and we had several past and present board members on with us. And then this coming Tuesday, the 29th, we're going to have Heather Dawn Thompson on with us to talk about the Rapid City Indian Boarding School. So we're having an ongoing boarding school discussion right now. We've also been, having discussions about how to have more Native representation, and particularly Indigenous women, in the media. With everything that happened with Rick Santorum and CNN sort of spurred the twin group to think about how we can get more Native women, sort of on a larger scale in the media, talking about, commenting on these issues that impact Indian country. So that's something we're also working on too. So if you're a Native woman and you want to join Twin, you can email me, rose.petoskeey@gmail.com, and I will add you to the group. Our founders are Melanie Benjamin, from the chief executive from Mille Lacs, and Marlene Helgamo, who's Ho-Chunk, and I really just help operate our group. And it's turned into a great group from just this informal aunties meeting, and now we're a group of over 200 Native women who meets every other Tuesday to talk about issues in Indian country. So
yeah, it's amazing, and it really goes to show the strength in Indian country of its women. And so is there ever a man that pops in there every once in a while? You ever invite any men on?
We have had a few male speakers, but the group has been all Native women. So yeah.
Yeah, so I'm always bringing these wonderful, powerful women onto the show, and I think I'm probably leaning more to bringing more women on than I have with bringing men on. So I think there's a little bit of a maybe feeling out there that I need to have a few more men on. But women are just so much more interesting than you guys. So don't ever forget, everyone who's watching the show, if that someone who is a good storyteller, loves to tell stories, or is an artist, or a traditional culture keeper, a lawyer, what is it? A lawyer, or an Indian chief? What is that? whatever they are, you think they'd be good for the show? Please let us know that you have someone you'd like to get on the show. Lance says guys are dumb, but we love you guys, and we're very grateful for you. Rose, you have just been amazing. I feel like there was another issue I wanted to talk to you about, and your the things that you're doing. And I don't know if everyone understands this, but as a managing associate at a large international law firm, and helping your significant other with a political campaign, and working, helping so much with Twin and NABA DC and young attorneys, and then staying close to culture and keeping your close ties with home. That's a lot, Rose. That's tremendous. And so, what is the one thing, if you could name just one thing, what's the one thing that really gives you the most joy in your life, and it helps fill you up again from all the things that you do and give? You give so much, because all of those things are you giving to others for Indian country. So what do you do for a little joy for yourself?
Well, I think all of those things, give me joy, and that's why I do them. And I think, I was raised, and as an Anishinaabe person, and you think about, our worldview, and what, I think about that every day. You view yourself as, just a part of the world, someone who can make a difference. And it's not about you, it's about trying to leave the world better than you found it, for future generations. And I think, doing all of these other things, it's just important to me because of that. And I just, want to make sure that when I'm gone, the world is still a better place for my tribe and for everyone who's here. So I think, even though it's a lot of work, it's been a crazy year too, but a lot of those things, give me a lot of joy too, to work on those things. So.
And I think, Rose, you summed it up beautifully. And I think that's what I see with these stories and our guest on Red Hoop Talk is that this kind of service-oriented mindset, this work in Indian country to make things better. It's just a part of our culture. It's a part of who we are and how we were raised to be. And then maybe, so John, I'm gonna pop yours up, who's Mohawk. He's listening to Just Women is Normal for him as Mohawk. So we're grateful to all your Mohawk aunties and grandmas out there, John. They're doing right. You're doing right by them. Rose, it's been wonderful. I know the evening is moving forward here, and I don't want to keep you away from a Friday evening of hopefully relaxing and taking care of yourself and your family. Anything else that you want to share with anyone out there?
I just want to say Chi-miigwech, thank you, Shannon, and to the association for having me on. I think this is great to have people on here, who are just everyday Native people doing their thing. So this has been great to talk to you and to be on.
Thank you, Rose. I appreciate you so much and so grateful for your time. I'm going to take you down and I'm going to close the show. All right.
Sounds good.
And let's see. And of course, I'm always like really clunky when it comes to this. Where are you? Okay. So everyone, thanks again. I think this was show number 62 or something like that. Thank you for joining us. And if you missed it or didn't get to see it or want to share something from the show, remember that this is also streaming on demand. You can find us on our YouTube channel. Just, put in that search term, Rose Petoskeey, in YouTube, and she's going to pop up on our Red Hoop Talk channel with the Association on American Indian Affairs. And I want to thank the Association on American Indian Affairs for producing this show and making this possible, and all of you who watch with us every week and support the association and support Red Hoop Talk. We're here and we're hoping to bring you new and diverse programming as the weeks and months wear on. And thank you. I'm trying to think of I should have something to pitch here, and I don't think I do. Oh, one thing is, if you're in the Washington, D.C. or Maryland area, I'm looking for someone who wants to help me with some file management. So if you're local in the area and want to make some extra cash, let us know. Reach out to general at indian-affairs.org and tell Jamie that you want to do some part-time work with the association. We're also looking for a public affairs and outreach coordinator. So if you feel up to the task, it's a lot of work, and you'd be working with three women who are pretty strong and opinionated. If you can handle it, also send your resume in to Jamie at general at indian-affairs.org. I appreciate all of you. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next week. And let's end this broadcast.